Hey everybody, for this lesson we're going to jump right into SketchUp and we're going to get started drawing some basic shapes. So when you first open the program, you're going to see that it's going to prompt you to choose a default template. And you'll see that there are several different templates with different styles applied to them, different backgrounds, different default units. So for us, we're just going to go ahead and we're going to start with the simple template that's in feet and inches. And at first you're going to see we have our default tray with a lot of different menus kind of nested underneath there. And we're going to get into each one of these eventually. But for now, let's just keep it simple. We're going to close that out. Another thing you're going to see is there's going to be a person here. And depending on which version you're working in, right now I'm working in 2017, there's a different person that comes with each particular version. Now, this person actually really does serve a purpose. And if you'll notice, right now I can use the tape measure tool. This gentleman here is about, you can see that tilde means approximately, he's about 5'10". It says approximately 5'10" and 3/8. But if you'll see, he's full scale. And that's the thing about SketchUp, along with any other CAD program, is that they're all done in full scale, full size. So when we want to create a scaled down or scaled up drawing, we can do that later on. Especially, it's a lot easier if we use layout in SketchUp Pro. But we always create full scale, one-to-one. And it's nice to have this person here in the beginning. He kind of gives us a sense of proportion based on what we're drawing. And even though it's nice to have him, we're going to get rid of him. So I'm just going to click on him, and I want you to do the same and just hit delete. So we're going to start with our very first shape, and we're going to kind of learn the commands as we go. So shape number one, it's a fairly simple block. I'm going to create it one of two ways. We're going to start with a subtractive method where we start with kind of the overall dimensions and then we start to carve away. And then we're going to do the additive method, which is the opposite of that. So to start, what we're going to do is we're going to go up to the rectangle tool, which is nested under shapes. It's usually the first one. So once you click on that, you can see we're prompted to select our first corner. So I'm going to start right here at the origin, right? This is the intersection of our blue, green, and red axes. So I'm just going to click once, and I'm going to click and release, right? I'm not going to click and hold. And after I released and I move my mouse, I can see I have options here to place the second corner. And down here on the bottom right, you can see our dimensions. They are changing as I move it. So I could just click randomly, and I can create a random shape. Or I can draw with accuracy, and I can click and I can make this particular shape as it is on our PDF here, 10 inches wide by 4 inches in depth. So I can type in 10 and then quotation for inches, or I can just type in 10 because the template that we're using, that default simple template feet and inches, is going to assume that whatever numbers we put in are inches unless we specify otherwise. So I could tell it 10 feet, 10 centimeters, 10 meters. But if I put in just 10 with this template, it's going to assume it's inches. So that actually saves us a lot of time. So I'm just going to do 10, comma, 4. And then I can zoom in to see what it is we drew. Now that 10, comma, 4, what that did was it started our rectangle at this corner here, and then it created the opposite corner 10 inches in the red direction and 4 inches in the green direction. Okay. Now, before we go any further, you might have noticed already that I'm starting to navigate kind of intuitively because I'm so used to the program. And that's what I want for you folks, is I want you to be able to navigate and become comfortable with the SketchUp environment straight away. So these are 3 navigation tools that are super important to learn straight away. And this is why I always recommend when you're using SketchUp to use a 3-button mouse. So it's just your standard mouse with that scroll wheel in the middle that you can click. And my mouse is like, I think it's $8. I got it 10 years ago. It's a Logitech. It still works. So that's all I'm using right now. And what I can do with this mouse is I can use these 3 key navigation tools, and I can do that without having to actually click on them up here. But I'm going to click on them right now just to give you an understanding as to what each one does. So our first navigation tool here is Orbit. So I can click, and I rarely do this, I can click on Orbit up here, and then wherever I click a second time, and drag my mouse around, it rotates my viewing angle. Right? So if you notice the rectangle, it's still locked to the origin here, but my viewing angle, or my perspective, can change. That's what orbit does, right? So it leaves it in place and it rotates my view. Pan, which is this hand here, does not rotate, but it grabs my view and it kind of shifts it around. So the angle remains the same. And then zoom, as you might imagine, right, allows us to zoom in and out. And all I'm doing is I'm clicking and I'm holding my mouse button while dragging the mouse forward or back. Now that's probably the last time you'll ever see me click up here to use those three commands, because those three commands are built right into the mouse. So we're going to kind of work backwards now. So starting with zoom, all you need to do is scroll in, right? I'm scrolling forward to zoom in, and I'm scrolling back towards me to zoom out, and it's going to zoom in to wherever your cursor is. So if you wanted to isolate and zoom into a particular area, you're going to move your cursor there before you scroll. Now, if you wanted to pan, there's two ways to do it, at least two ways. So one of the ways is to hold Control. Oh, I'm sorry, to hold Shift. So you're going to hold Shift and the middle mouse button. So I'm holding Shift and the scroll wheel, and I'm able to pan around. Now, I got a little tripped up because that's not really how I typically do it. The way I typically do it, and the way I recommend you folks do it, is I hold the click wheel, and you'll notice when I hold the click wheel, that brings up orbit. We're going to talk about that in just a moment. I hold down the click wheel and the left mouse button, and now that turns to pan. So that's really the way that I always do it. So I'm right-handed, so right now I'm using my middle finger to hold down the click wheel and my index finger to hold down the left mouse button, and that turns to pan. So I already kind of gave it away, but if you just click that click wheel and hold it down, that's going to activate the orbit command. So using those together, I can zoom in, I can orbit, I can pan, and I'm doing all this with my mouse. And the other thing you should notice is, suppose I was in the line tool and I wanted to zoom out, zoom back in, pan, orbit, get to the top over here. I can do all that without leaving the command, right? I didn't have to click on this, pan, orbit, and then go back to that tool. And that's the key thing about using the shortcuts on the mouse, okay? So now that I've showed you that, I kind of want to start from the beginning really quick and start a new rectangle. So again, I click to start it. I'm going to type in 10, 4. And now what I want to do is, because we're using the subtractive method, is I want to make this shape three-dimensional. And we're going to do that with this tool here. It's called the push-pull tool. So I can click on push-pull, and what that does is it takes any face, and it lets me click on it just once, drag into the direction I want to go, and I can just click. I can do Control-Z to undo that click. Instead of doing it randomly, I can type in and do it accurately. So in this case, the height of this box is 6 inches. I can hit enter. So in order to get the shape that I want, I really want to do this accurately. I want to teach you the proper techniques to get you in good habits straight away. I'm going to use the tape measure tool to kind of set up my lines to be able to define the shape and be able to eventually subtract and remove the areas that we no longer want. So the tape measure tool does a couple of things. It does what you'd probably expect it to do. Right? I click on an end, another end, and it can tell me the distance between two places, right? But the other thing it does, you'll notice what it just did, is it also can create infinite guidelines. And these infinite guidelines allow us to draw with accuracy. So if I was to draw and lay out the lines for the top view, right, along the top, I can use the tape measure tool by referencing an edge, click just once, and we get this infinite guideline. Now sometimes you won't get a guideline. Sometimes you'll get a line like this. This is for measuring distance. If you hit Control, then oftentimes it will switch you back to where you want to be. So I want that distance to be 3 inches. So right now, again, it's just moving with my mouse, but if I type in 3 and hit enter, I can make that guideline 3 inches away from here. So it's basically offset that edge. And I'm going to do the same from the other edge, 3 inches. And now I can trace that guideline, right, from intersection to intersection on both sides. So what that did is it now took that face and it broke it up into 3 different faces. So I'm actually able to push-pull just the areas that I want. So I was able to add, right, and create a 3-dimensional shape with push-pull. Now I'm also able to subtract. So I want to push-pull down, right? I've just clicked and released once, and I'm moving my mouse in the direction I want to go. And on this side, I want to go down 2 inches. And on this side, I want to go down 3 inches. And I type in 3, I hit enter to let the program know I'm done inputting my distances. Okay, and then I can just go to edit, delete guides. And now I have that first shape using the subtractive method. If I wanted to create it using the additive method, there's a number of ways I can do it. The way I'm going to choose to do it right now is with the line tool. What I'm going to do is I'm going to draw this profile completely, and then we're going to push-pull it across. So I can start by clicking anywhere from my start point, and then making sure that my mouse is tracking along the axis that I'd like it to. So in this case, I want it to track along the red axis. And when it does, I can type in my distance. So it's going to make a 10-inch line. Then I'm going to make sure it snaps to the blue axis. I'm going to make a 3-inch line along the blue, a 3-inch line along the red, 3-inch along the blue again, 4-inch along the red, 2, 3, and then I'll close the shape. So again, that's what's so great about SketchUp is anytime I have a closed shape, right, that's on any plane, right, so all of these edges are coplanar, right, so they're all flat with one another, 2-dimensional shape. SketchUp's going to automatically fill that in with a face, and that's all SketchUp is. It's just lines and faces. So when SketchUp recognizes a closed face, I'm able to use push-pull to extrude that face, and in this case I'm going to extrude it 4 inches. So now I have 2 identical shapes using an additive technique and a subtractive technique. Okay, so what I'd like you to do is give this a shot. See if you can create this first shape using either the additive or subtractive method, or maybe even both. Before you do that, I want to just quickly remind you of the 3 navigation tools, right? Zooming in by scrolling in or out on the click wheel, orbiting by holding that click wheel down, and panning by keeping the click wheel held down and holding the left mouse button. Now there's another key feature here that I'd like you to become familiar with before you try this out, right? And it's the select tool and the way that the select tool works. So the select tool is what we use to select any given entity or entities. And in order to select multiple entities and making sure you're selecting things correctly, you really need to understand how it works. So if you notice, when I clicked on this edge, it turned blue. That means that this edge is selected. If I click on another edge, the original edge becomes deselected, and I've now selected this new edge. If I wanted to select both, I can hold Shift to add to my selection. You see this little plus minus that shows up, and that minus is up because if I select something by mistake or wanted to deselect it, I can just click on it once more. Okay, so if I wanted to delete these 3 edges, I can select them and then hit delete on my keyboard. I mean, I could use erase, but I like to select and then delete. And if you notice when I did that, more than just those 3 edges deleted, it also got rid of the face that was once there. I'll do Control-Z to bring that back, because that face cannot exist without those bounding edges. It can't even exist without just this one edge. I hit delete, and that face goes away. So if I did that by mistake, and that's going to happen to you, I can heal my surface, right, by drawing that edge back in. It's going to bring back that face. Okay. Now, there's more to the select tool than that, right? We can add individually to our selection, and we can deselect as well. But we can also select more quickly using our selection window, right? So we have a solid selection window, and that comes about by just clicking and dragging to your right. If you click and drag to your left, we have a crossing window, and these function very differently, and I can show you that right now. If we use our solid selection window, clicking and dragging to the right, and then we release, I hope you notice that the only thing that was selected was this one line. The reason for that is because that one line is the only entity of this shape that is completely bound by my selection window. So only entire shapes or entities that are within the selection window when it's solid will be selected. Now if I made the same sized selection window, but I went up and to the left, I created a crossing window, you should notice that everything that made contact with that selection window was selected. And you'll use both of these, right, depending on what you want to achieve. Now, another way that I can select this entire shape, right, besides just using a full selection window, is I could double click it because it's two-dimensional, right? If I double clicked over here, it will select a two-dimensional face and the surrounding edges. Or I could triple click it, and that's going to allow me to select the entire shape. Right, so as you're working, if you make a mistake, if you need to delete something, you can just go ahead and triple click if you want to delete the entire object, or click individually based on the entity. And every time I do that, I click and I hit delete on my keyboard. Right? You can erase, but to me that's an extra step. Right? So give this a shot. Try creating them, both ways or one way. It's up to you. When you're finished, then I want you to go ahead and I want you to try the other shapes. Now, I'm going to make them as well, and you can watch me go through them, but it's up to you. If you want to challenge yourself and try them first, then come back and watch the video of me doing them, then I think that's a great idea. But if you feel like, this is still pretty new to you and you want to watch me do it first, then I think that's great as well.